كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. So today, what will we be covering? So firstly, we'll talk about the divorce of a mute person. Will that divorce occur or not? So we'll start from there, inshallah. Then we'll move on to the attribution of divorce. So if a person attributes, meaning he suspends divorce, then what happens? So we'll talk about all the different aspects of that. Then we'll also talk about the different conditions that a person can make in a divorce. So if a person states a condition that if you, for example, talk to so-and-so person, then you are divorced, what happens? And the different ways that a person can utter these kind of wordings, these kind of sentences. And different rulings in relation to that. We will talk about all of these conditions and their outcomes, the divorce that occurs, and when that will then be, when the condition will be fulfilled, what happens if the condition is fulfilled, and if there's a dispute between the husband and wife regarding the condition being fulfilled, what will happen in that scenario. We'll talk about that, and I'll explain a concept here, inshallah, for you, as to whenever there's disputes, then what happens. So we'll talk about that, meaning how do we judge that ruling. So we'll shed some light on that, inshallah. Then we will talk about what he goes through in the book, where if a divorce is given to a wife who he has not consummated marriage with or spent time in seclusion with, then what happens? We've kind of touched on that before, but here we'll discuss the details of that, and a few juz'i rulings again. We'll talk about a few of them. And then we'll talk about attributing divorce to a place, to a makan. Can you do that? And can you attribute talaq to a zaman, to a time? So we'll talk about that too. And then lastly, we'll talk about handing over divorce. So if you hand over divorce to the wife, what happens? What are the rulings? Likewise, if you hand over divorce to another person, not the wife, then what happens? And we'll also touch on the common thing that's happening nowadays of adding this kind of a condition into the nikah contract. Can this be done, and should it be done? We'll talk about that, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So now we move on to where he discusses regarding the talaq of a mute person, a person who's unable to speak. How can this person issue a talaq? So in simple terms, the person will issue a talaq through sign language, in essence, through ishara, and like that a person can issue a talaq. Normally a person who is able to speak will issue a talaq verbally. Obviously talaq through written statements can also be issued. Moving on, then he says when a man attributes talaq to nikah, meaning if a person was to say that if I marry you or when I marry you, then you are divorced. So now what's he done? He has attributed that talaq to the marriage. So it's quite obvious, if he does marry this woman, then she will be divorced. Likewise, if he was to say something very drastic, whereby he says that every woman I marry, she is divorced. So anytime he marries a woman, she will be divorced, obviously. because it's the condition he has mentioned. Once the condition is fulfilled, the outcome of divorce will come into play. So then the next few masail that he mentions are all to do with this condition and its outcome, where he describes that when a person attributes talaq to any condition and that condition fulfills, then the divorce will take place. So for instance, if a person says, if you go to your mother's house, or if you go to your father's house, or if you speak to so-and-so, then you are divorced. So if that condition fulfills, she goes to her mother's house, she speaks to so-and-so person, then the divorce will occur. Whether he knows or not, doesn't matter. The point is that the condition fulfilled. So that's that. Now, what's important to understand here is that when he attributes talaq in this manner to a future time, because that's what he's doing, he's attributing talaq to a condition coming about. So it's not happening right now. He is in essence suspending it on something. But when you suspend a talaq on something, what's two conditions need to be there? One is that at the time when he is taking this, when he's saying this statement, then he needs to be the owner of that divorce, meaning he needs to be married to her currently. So if he is married to his wife and he says to her that if you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. If she talks to so-and-so, she will be divorced. But if he is not married to her currently, he doesn't own that divorce currently. So for example, it's his fiancée, he is going to marry her, and he says to her that if you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. Now she doesn't talk to that person up until the nikah takes place. Once the nikah takes place, then maybe a month or so later, whenever later, after the nikah, she talks to that person. Nothing happens. Why? Because though he said, if you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced, when he said it, he didn't own that divorce. He didn't have ownership over that divorce. So therefore, when he eventually marries her and the condition fulfills, no divorce will take place because the condition wasn't fulfilled. So the first condition is that he has to be owner of that divorce when suspending that divorce, when saying that condition. Or he has to attribute it to his ownership, meaning he has to attribute it to the time of nikah. So for instance, he says that to his fiancée, in the same example, he says, after I marry you, or if I marry you and you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. So now he has attributed to the marriage, right? That he said that once I marry you and you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. Now, if she does, after nikah, talk to that so-and-so person, she will be divorced. So it's one of two conditions. The two conditions are that either he is currently married to her, or if he's not currently married to her, he has to attribute it to the marriage. So these two conditions must be there, either one of the two, meaning if either one of the two are missing, he's not currently married to her, he didn't attribute it to the marriage, then no divorce will take place, even if she fulfills the condition. So that is this mas'ala over here. Then he goes on to mentioning the different, in Arabic, the different wordings that he can use to indicate a condition. So he mentions in, which means if, idha, when, idha ma, whenever, kullu, all, every woman I marry, like that, or every time you enter the house you are divorced, something like that. Right? Kullama, mata, matama, same thing, when, whenever. So in all of these cases, when the condition is found, then the condition will be fulfilled, it's finished. So if he says to her, if you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. So she talks to so-and-so, that person, she talked to him, or talked to her, and then she got the divorce. Then he took her back, he took her back, they got married again, or he took her back, he revoked that divorce. Then she talked to that so-and-so person again. The divorce will not take place again, because once she fulfilled the condition, it's finished, it's done. The divorce takes place, and then it becomes undone, in essence. It becomes untied, as we would say. But if he said wordings which would continue that divorce. So for example, he said, every time you talk to that person, you are divorced. Or whenever you talk to that person, you are divorced. Now it will be continuous. So it just depends on the wording he uses. Now, if 3 times this happens, whereby every time you talk to so-and-so, you're divorced. So then she talked to so-and-so, divorced. Then he retracted, revoked, they're married again, and then she talked to that person again, second divorce will take place. And likewise, if it happened a third time, a third divorce took place. That's it, now it's finished. That the talaq now, the divorce is a mughallad, a heavy form of divorce, which we call a irrevocable divorce, right? So that's it, that's finished. And then she went and married somebody else, moved on in life, she tried to make it work with somebody else. It didn't work, she got divorced there as well. And now she comes back to her first husband, and she marries that previous, husband. Now, the divorces won't take place anymore. So if she talks to so-and-so, that previous marriage condition he made won't follow in this marriage. But this only happens after 3 divorces, remember that, right? So not after 1 or 2 divorces. So if he gave her 1 divorce, meaning she talked to so-and-so, she got divorced, and she went off and married somebody else and came back, right? Then that condition will continue. So if she talks to so-and-so, then she will get divorced. So this, what we talked about, where the previous condition will completely finish, even though he said every time. This only happens in every time, remember. So every time you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. So every time she talks to so-and-so, she will be divorced. But that will only be the 3 divorces of this marriage. Once this marriage is finished and she comes back after having married somebody else, then it's like a new person, completely new person. The slate is wiped clean. So the previous, the previous condition won't continue. So hopefully this is a very intricate mas'ala. Hopefully people have understood what this is talking about. But like I said, he reiterates, he makes sure people understand that if the 1 or 2 divorces have happened, then it will not restart the condition. The condition will continue if 1 or 2 divorces have happened, even if she went off and married somebody else. Now, if, for example, he said to his wife that if you talk to so-and-so, let's just keep the same example, if you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced 3 times, meaning you will get 3 divorces all in one go. Now he realizes that, what did I do? So what he can do is actually verbally divorce her, then let her finish her waiting period. She no longer is his wife. And then now outside of the nikah, the marriage, she can talk to so-and-so person. The condition triggers, but the outcome, which is talaq, can't come into play because he's not married to her. So she did talk to so-and-so, so the shart comes and gets triggered, but the jaza, as we say, the outcome cannot come into play, the talaq can't come into play, so then it will get undone. So he didn't say every time, by the way, here. He just said that if you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. So 3 times. So now, if he does that, the solution to that is simply that make sure that this condition comes about. Firstly, make sure that this condition doesn't come about. Try, that it doesn't come about. But if he realizes that, look, he says, for example, that if you go to your mother's house, you are divorced 3 times. But then he realizes that, what did I do? I'm preventing her from visiting her mother. I shouldn't do that. He realizes that afterwards. So then what does he do? He decides to let her go to mother's house, but then she's going to get divorced 3 times. So then the solution would be to give 1 divorce, let her finish her waiting period, then go to mother's house. The condition is now fulfilled. No talaq can come into play because he's not married to her, and then he can remarry her, and then she can carry on visiting, because it was, remember, only 1 time. It was, if you marry, then it gets undone, as we talked about previously. So hopefully this is understood. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now moving on, if there is a dispute between the husband and wife regarding whether the condition was found, so he said to her, if you talk to so-and-so, you are divorced. Now she says that I've talked to so-and-so, so the condition is found, so a divorce has taken place. He says, no, you haven't talked to so-and-so. You didn't do it. So the condition has not been fulfilled, meaning the divorce has not happened. So there's a dispute like this. So the wife will be told that bring proof. She will be told, if it goes to Sharia court, she will be told that bring proof that you did talk to so-and-so. If she's able to bring proof, then obviously we will listen to her. If she's unable to bring proof, then we will tell the husband that, okay, take an oath that she hasn't talked to so-and-so, and we will, in essence, go with that then. Because the idea is that there is a dispute here, and whenever there's a dispute, there is a defendant and there is a claimant to be established. This will help you throughout whenever there's disputes in anything. So remember this, because this goes according to the hadith, al-bayyinatu ala al-mudda'i wal-yaminu ala al-mudda'a alayh. Meaning that the burden of proof is on the claimant, and the defendant simply needs to take an oath to defend their position. So here the defendant is the husband. The reason why, how do we establish defendant and claimant? So whenever there's a dispute, you have to establish first, you have to establish, and the easiest thing to establish is the defendant first. Whoever is the defendant, the opposite obviously would be the claimant, right? So the defendant will be the one who is claiming the norm, the one who's claiming the thing that is current. So the husband is claiming that no divorce has taken place, meaning that our marriage is still intact, nothing has come about. So because he's claiming that he is the defendant here, she is saying, no, something came about. I talked to so-and-so. So she's going to have to prove that something coming about. And it's logically understood as well that obviously you can't be burdening the person who claims the norm to bring proof for that, because that's the norm. That's like the silence, right? That's the still, right? How do you bring proof on that, right? You have to have somebody on her head 24/7 to make sure that no, she never talked to that so-and-so person throughout, all of the 24/7, all of the 24 hours of her day, 7 days a week. She never talked to that so-and-so person at all. You can't bring proof for that, right? You can't tell somebody that bring proof for that. It's illogical. So that's the reason why that person is the defendant here. So obviously sometimes the roles will be switched, where the wife will sometimes be a defendant and the man will be the claimant in certain scenarios. So that would just depend on who claims the norm, in essence. So it's a simple thing to understand how to establish over here who we listen to, who do we go by is the idea, and who do we ask for proof. Now, having said that, the ruling, we need to also understand that if it's a condition which only she can inform us of. So for instance, he says to her that if you menstruate, when you menstruate, you are divorced. Something like that. So now obviously he can't say, for example, she says that I've menstruated, now I'm divorced. He says, no, you haven't. I mean, how does he know? How does he know? I mean, how are we going to listen to him? Here, we're going to have to go by her, right? We're going to have to accept that she is informing us that she is now come to her menstrual cycle. So we have to listen to her here. So if it's something which can only be known from her, then obviously in these kind of matters, we will obviously go with her statement rather than his statement. So this is an obvious logical thing as well. But another concept here to remember is that whenever it comes to a person making a claim against themselves, like here, the wife is in essence making a claim that, I have, come into my menstrual cycle. This is a claim. She will not be told to prove it. We will just go by what she says. So, because obviously burdening her with proof of it will be very vile, right? How are you going to prove that? Right? She's going to have to expose herself, or, if somebody thinks that, she can bring some sort of proof like a pad or something, right? But that could be somebody else's. So that will still not be proof, right? So it's like very illogical to try to tell her to bring proof on it. We just have to go with her word, just to go by what she's saying. But whenever we go by somebody's word and we say, okay, we're accepting you, we're considering you to be truthful here. Whenever we do that, we will only listen to them in relation to their rights, not in relation to somebody else's rights. So what that means is, for example, he gives us an example here, that if the man says that he's got 2 wives, for example, and he says to one wife that if or when you come onto haid, when you menstruate, that you are divorced and the other wife is also divorced. So when the wife claims that, yeah, I've come onto my menstrual cycle, then only she will be divorced, not the other one, because it's a claim when it comes to, in regards to somebody else. Because if we listen to her, then that means she is claiming something on somebody else. We will accept when it comes to your own right, but only in regards to your right, right? So your nikah will come to an end, but not somebody else's, right? So this is something to understand, a concept here to understand, which is that whenever we listen to somebody, we accept their confession, in essence. That confession will be restricted to their rights. It won't transfer onto somebody else, generally speaking. So this is a rule to be understood, and inshallah, hopefully up ahead there will be certain masail that will come up, more rulings will come up, which this particular concept will become clearer even more, inshallah. Now, he mentions certain juz'i rulings, meaning that if he says to her, depending on the wording, if he says to her that if you come onto haid, if you come onto menstruation, then you are divorced. What will happen is, as soon as she starts her menstrual cycle, as soon as she starts the menstruation, she will be divorced. But we won't know until 3 days. So, meaning if she starts bleeding, we don't know whether this is her menstrual cycle yet, because it might be just 1 day and she doesn't bleed after that at all. So that 1 day would not have been a menstrual cycle, right? Because it has to be minimum 3 days. So she bled for 1 day, day 1, then day 2, then day 3. Now that she bleeds on day 3, now we know that it is menstruation. But we know that it was menstruation from the beginning. So the divorce would have occurred from the beginning. But we'll only know in hindsight. We'll only know afterwards. That's the idea here. So, because we have to establish it to be a haid. But that's if he says the wording that if you come into menstruation, or when you come into menstruation, you are divorced. But if he says something like, when you pass a menstrual cycle, you are divorced, then she has to pass the full menstrual cycle. Once she passes the menstrual cycle, then after that, she will be divorced. So it's just depending on the wording that he uses is the idea. Then he moves on to the slave girl masail again. I'm just going to briefly mention the gist of it. So he says that the slave girl, the divorce that she gets is 2, because she gets, normally the free woman gets three divorces, so the slave girl will only get 2 divorces, and after 2 it's finished for her. And her iddah, meaning her waiting period, will also be less than, meaning obviously we can't do 1.5, so we just make it 2 menstrual cycles. It doesn't matter who the husband is. The husband could be a slave man, a husband could be a free man, doesn't matter. It all depends on the wife here. Then, now he moves on to a mas'ala that we kind of have discussed already anyway, that if a man divorces his wife, who he has not consummated marriage with yet, right? If he gives her 3 in one go by saying you are divorced 3 times, then all 3 will occur, because we can't separate that. But the more interesting mas'ala, which we kind of have prayed already, is that if he separates the divorces, saying talaq, 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 or if he says you are divorced, you are divorced, you are divorced the 3rd time, so he says it like that or something, so that only the first one will occur, because after the first one, remember, she would have already become irrevocably divorced. There was no waiting period on her, so there is no connection between him and her at all. So the very next second when he tries to issue another divorce to her, he can't, because she's become a stranger to him. She is no longer his wife at all. So this is when it's a wife who he has not consummated marriage with, or done the equivalent, which is spent some time in seclusion with her. He then goes into certain juz'i masail. I'll just mention it just briefly. I'm not going to mention details for it because it's not really too important, but just for the sake of continuation of the kitab, that we're doing here of the Quduri. So he says that if a man says to his wife, you are divorced one and one, just the normal wife of his, or if he says it to, in fact over here he's talking about it in relation to this wife that he has not consummated marriage with. So remember, if he divorces her, she would already become the talaq ba'in will occur with her, meaning an irrevocable divorce will happen and she will have no iddah. So if he says you are divorced one and one, only the first one will occur. The second one won't occur, because as soon as he said the first, the divorce had already occurred, meaning that she was irrevocably divorced already. There was no connection between him and her. Now if he says to her, you are divorced one before one, so it's the wording he's using here, right? So he says you are divorced one, so in essence he's giving her this one divorce over here, this one before one, meaning this one is before one that is going to come up later on. Then obviously the only one will occur, the other one can't occur. And then if he says to her, you are divorced one, you divorced this one, after it, another one. So obviously the one afterwards can't occur, so only that one will occur. So these two rulings are the same, meaning only one divorce will occur in both these scenarios. Now if we switch it slightly now, the opposite ruling. So if he says to her, you are divorced one before it, so this one and before this one is one. So that means there's one here now and before it is another one. So that means this one occurred before, right? But obviously you can't make a talaq occur before. I mean, I can't sit here, for example, no man can sit saying I divorced you in the past. Meaning he's not informing of a divorce, he's actually issuing a divorce now, but he's saying I issue a divorce right now, but I want it to occur from yesterday or from last week. I'm going back in time and I'm issuing you a divorce from yesterday, like that. But that can't happen, you can't do that. You don't have the capability of going back in time, right? Nobody has that capability. So the point is that if he issues a divorce right now, says I give you a divorce right now, and before it another one, so that one that was before will then in essence happen at the same time. It will be pushed basically to happen at the same time right now. So that means two divorces are happening simultaneously together right now, so two divorces will occur on her. Though she is a woman who he has not consummated marriage with, two divorces will occur. In exactly the same manner, if he says to her, you are divorced this one, after one. So this one here is after one, that one that had already occurred before that. So in this scenario also, that one that is occurring before, in essence, that one will now happen at the same time, simultaneously, so two will occur at the same time. Likewise, if he said you are divorced one, or with it one, so all of this simultaneous, two divorces are taking place on her. So it just depends on the wordings he's using here. Now, moving on, I'm not going to go through certain masail which are dependent on certain just complications, and they're juz'i masail, they're like offshoot masail which are not too important. If he says to her, for example, he says to her, you are divorced in a certain place, so meaning that you are divorced in the house. And outside the house, we have to save face, so we are like husband and wife outside the house. But in the house, we are divorced. You are divorced, you're not my wife. He can't do that. The idea simply is you can't attribute talaq to a makan, to a place, right? You can attribute talaq to a time. Yeah, that's at so-and-so time you are divorced. But you cannot attribute talaq to confine it to a makan, to a place. So you're divorced only in London. Outside of London, you are not divorced, for example. You can't do that. But what you can do is attribute the talaq to when they enter that place. So if you enter London, you are divorced. But now that's not attributing talaq to a place. That's actually attributing talaq to the time of entry into that place. So it's still attributing talaq to the time here. So attribution can be made to a time, but attribution cannot be made to a place. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now moving on, he then talks about giving divorce for in the future. So he says that I give you divorce when tomorrow arrives, or tomorrow. So then the divorce will occur at the beginning of tomorrow, meaning at the time when the Fajr time starts. So at the Subah Sadiq, Fajr time beginning is the beginning of the day. So that's when the divorce will occur. He can specify a certain time of the day with his intention. If he does do so, then that will occur according to what he intended. That's that done. Now comes the rulings of when a man gives the authority of divorce to his wife. So he hands over the divorce to his wife. So he says that you choose. The choice is yours. You know, the matter is in your hands. Things like this. So if he says things like this, then what's needed to be understood here is that she will have the right to issue a divorce only in that gathering, in that session. So if in this session currently he says to his wife, you have the choice to divorce yourself. Yeah, you have the choice. The matter is in your hands regarding divorce. Any of these kind of statements. So now he's handed over the right to divorce to her. So in essence, if you understand it like a tennis court, right? So he's, hit the ball onto her side of the court. So the ball's on your court now. The ball is in your hands, right? So now it's up to her to decide. But she can only decide in that session. She has to decide in that session. So if she says in that session, if she says, no, I don't want it, then that's it, it's finished. Likewise, if she not just verbally expresses it, but let's say she shows it through her actions that she's not interested, meaning she walks away from this gathering. She walks away, she stands up and she walks away. Then again, that means the matter has left her hands, that the ball was on her court, now it comes back to him again and he regains ownership of it. But if she stays there in that session and she just sits there contemplating, thinking about it, then she can sit there as long as she wants to. Yeah, she can sit there for days if be. But as long as she is sitting there in that same session, she will have that right. The ball will still be in her court. He cannot take it back. So if he says to her, you choose, and she's there thinking about it, after a little while he says, I take it back. He can't take it back. There's no way he can take it back because the ball is in her court, remember that. She needs to hand it back to him for him to then say that, okay, now I've got it back in essence. Yeah, right? So that hopefully that makes sense. Obviously, once he hands over the right to divorce to her, he can still issue her another divorce. He can still say, I issue you a divorce, right? Because he still has the right to do that. But he can't take back from her the right to issue the divorce if he has given her the right. But she has the right confined and restricted to that session only. The only time it goes beyond the session is if he says to her that you've got 2 days to think about it, or you've got 5 days to think about it, or you've got the right to divorce forever, whenever you want. Something like that. So now this goes beyond the session because his wording obviously says so. So this is important to understand in terms of concept of when the man gives the choice to the wife, it's generally restricted to that gathering. And if she doesn't show any form of rejection, either verbally or through her physical actions, she doesn't show any sign of rejection, then she will keep that as long as she remains in that session. But if she shows some sign of rejection, like I said, she walks away, or in fact, even if she gets up, she stands up, just by standing up, even if she's standing in the same position that she was in, sitting. So she was sitting in that spot and she stands up in that spot. That's it, it's finished. It's no longer her right anymore. Right? So the point is that she does something which shows that she's not interested. Right? She stands up. Standing up is a sign that she's going to walk away now. Right? But if she was standing and she sits down, there it's a sign of, oh, now I'm properly thinking about this. I'm actually contemplating this. So there, it will not be a sign of, rejection. But if, for example, if she was sitting there and she was listening to him, and then she started to now play games or something on her phone or something like that, or she started to show like, I'm not interested. So though she's sitting in the same session, but she has shown that she's not interested. So again, the matter will leave her hands. So the idea, hopefully, people have got is when the matter leaves her hands. Nowadays, just to cover this mas'ala as well, a lot of people, they put into the contract of nikah that the wife will have the right to issue a divorce as well, for whatever reasons, certain reasons or whatever. I strongly discourage from this. The reason is simply because handing over the right to divorce to the wife is in essence saying that Allah got it wrong, basically. Sharia got it wrong. In essence, that's what it's saying, isn't it? That, the Sharia has said that only the man can give divorce. But we're not happy with that. We want to say that the woman can also give divorce, so I'm going to hand over the divorce to her. So this is very dangerous, treading on, dangerous grounds here when a person does this for this kind of a reason. So it's important that people don't go into this kind of a thing. Obviously, Allah having set the rule that only a man can give divorce, there is great wisdom behind this. There is a lot of reasoning behind why only the man can give divorce and not the woman, not the wife here. So handing over the right of divorce to the wife is quite dangerous. Now, I can understand that sometimes some people have fear, that you have stubborn people, like we talked about previously, that don't issue the divorce when they're meant to issue the divorce. So then what do you do about that? And that's what they're trying to get around. I get that. But then the solution to that would simply be to hand over the right to divorce to some other neutral party. So let's say, for example, the condition could be made. Again, I don't encourage these things, but no problem if a person made this kind of a condition, it would be better than making the condition to hand over the right of divorce to the wife fully. So for example, say that, if there's something that happens between us for whatever reason, then I will bring a scholar and you will bring a scholar, and those two scholars can get together and decide. I give the right to them scholars to issue a divorce if they feel fit. So then, obviously, because this will be external parties that have no, connection, you would say, family connection, scholars, two independent scholars have been brought. They will issue the divorce if they see fit. So there will be no oppression from the husband's side, as well as there will be no jumping the gun and giving a divorce where it's not meant to be a divorce. So hopefully that kind of solves the problem. So maybe that kind of a solution could be undertaken if need be. Now, if he hands her over the right to divorce, he says to her, the matter is in your hands regarding divorce. And she says, okay, I choose myself, meaning I divorce myself. Anything like this. So if she chooses herself, or she says that, okay, I give myself so then generally speaking, a irrevocable divorce will take place. One irrevocable divorce generally will take place. Now, if the husband intends that, no, I want it to be I gave you 3 divorces, and if you issue this, that I consider it to be 3, then obviously it will be 3 because it's the husband's doing, the husband's handed over this, and that's what's going to happen. And he goes on to some juz'i masail. I've kind of explained most of it anyway. Now, handing over the right to somebody else, he goes on to. So if somebody says, the man says to another person, that go and divorce my wife, then this is different to when giving the right to the wife. So when giving the right to the wife, when she's being told that give yourself a divorce, or the matter is in your hands regarding divorce, then this is tamlik, we call it. You're giving ownership to the wife of divorce. But when you are telling somebody else, another person, that give divorce to my wife, if you want, or whatever, you say the matter regarding divorce is in your hands to give divorce to my wife. This is not tamlik, this is tawkil, wakala. You are making this person your wakil, your representative. When you're giving ownership to the wife, she's not the representative of yours, she is given ownership of the divorce. So what the difference between the two is, that when you give ownership to the wife, you can't take it back. That's one thing. You can't take it back until she gives it back to you. So you can't take it back, that's one thing we discussed. And the second thing is that it's restricted to the gathering, to the session. It's 2 things that we have to remember, yeah? That it's restricted to the session and you can't take it back. And when you're doing tawkil, when you give that agency to somebody else to be a representative that go and give divorce to the wife, then this is not confined to the gathering, because the whole idea is that it's not, right? Because that if you're telling him to go give divorce to the wife, then he's going to leave that gathering and go give divorce to her, right? So the idea is that it's not restricted to the gathering, but because it's not restricted to the gathering, it can also be taken back. You can take it back. So let's say he's walking out the door and you say, oh, come back here, I take it back. I take my words back. You can't issue this anymore. You're not my proxy anymore. You're not my agent anymore. You don't have that responsibility anymore. You take it back. So when you take it back, it's done. He can't say that, no, you handed it over to me, so I'm going to keep it as long as I want. No, that's not the case. It's once you take it back from them, it is gone. It's no longer their responsibility anymore. So hopefully this difference between tamlik and tawkil, giving ownership and giving agency, is now understood. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. So today, just to summarize what we've done, we talked about the divorce of a mute person, that it will issue, the divorce of a mute person will issue by indication, by gesture, by sign language or something, right? Or even by writing it down. Then all we have to be sure is that he did write it down. Then the attributing of talaq, right? So if a person attributes talaq, remembering two conditions there, that if you suspend the divorce, that the suspension must be in the state where you are currently married to the wife, or you attribute it to the marriage. So if he does that, then the divorce will occur after the condition is found. So once the condition is found, the divorce will occur. So that's the general state of any condition. And if he makes a condition by saying that every time so-and-so thing happens, then you are divorced, then every time that thing happens, she will be divorced. Up until 3 times, after which no longer that condition can be fulfilled, right? Because maximum divorces are 3. So that ruling we discussed in detail. Then we discussed this concept of disputes, right? Remembering that whenever there's a dispute in any ruling, how do you determine who is defendant and who is claimant? Because that's something that you're going to have to work out. Because the claimant has to bring proof, defendant doesn't need to take oath. If the claimant brings proof, defendant doesn't take any oath. The claimant just brings the proof and we judge according to the proof. But if the claimant fails to bring any proof, is unable to bring proof, then we move to the second step of telling the defendant to take an oath. If they take an oath, then we rule according to what they're saying. If they don't take an oath, then we can't rule according to what they're defending and saying, then obviously, because why will they not take an oath? It's obvious that they're probably lying. So the concept here of establishing defendant first, because that's the easier thing to do, and that is the person who is claiming the norm, the default, in essence, in a ruling. So that person is the defendant, and the other party would in essence become the claimant, who would have to prove that the claim, whatever the claim is being made. The reason I say it is not as simple as whoever puts the claim in, they're the claimant. It's not like that, because remember, both people are making a claim. So for example, this book that I've got here, I can make a claim that this is my book, and you can make a claim that this is your book. We're both making claims. I'm making a claim, you're making a claim. Who's the defendant? Who is the claimant? According to what Shariat is saying, that needs to be established. So how is that established? Is I would be the defendant because I've currently got possession over the book. So normally the owner has possession. That's the norm. So I'm claiming the norm, that I'm the owner of this book because I've got physical possession over the book. For you to be saying it's your book, you need to now bring proof. So anyway, hopefully that is understood, how to establish this in terms of concept. Then if it was a condition which can only be understood from her, like if she comes onto menstrual cycle, then obviously we will listen to her, to the wife. That was something we covered there. And a few juz'i rulings we went through. Then we went through the talaq qabla al-dukhul, meaning the divorce before any consummation of marriage. What happens? It equals a irrevocable, but if he gives it all in one go, then what happens? And if he says one before one and one before it one, and all of them were rulings we went through. Then we talked about attributing talaq to a makan, a place, you can't do that. Meaning you can't restrict the talaq to a place. Talaq, if it occurs in every place, not just in one place. So it'll be all across the board. But you can attribute talaq to a zaman, to a time. So then we talked about the handing over of divorce. So handing over divorce to the wife. So if he says that it's your choice, you choose, then this is tamleek. You are giving ownership to her. So in this, there's two aspects where you can't take that back until she gives it back, and you can't. So it's restricted to the session. So where one way it's a bit more strict, the other side is a bit more lenient. We're restricted to session only. And then we talked about handing over the divorce to another person, to a third party, and that can also be done, but that's going to be tawkeel. So there it's not restricted to the session, but you can take it back. So this was what we talked about